Coogs House. The Houston Cougars win 25-24 in a game that was never in doubt. Right? Right?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, and we're going live tonight for Cougars After Dark to break down the day in football that was Houston wins 25-24. Remember to catch us and hit subscribe on YouTube. Get us that 1750 mark. Doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers. We're at 1670 last I saw, although I should probably know more of the up-to-date number on that. But hit subscribe, help us get to 1750. Like and comment videos to let us know you get there. If you are ecstatic and you don't know what to say, but you don't feel like typing in the comment box, tell us in the comments on the video, I should say, what the first word out of your mouth was when Donovan Smith crossed the goal line. He actually crossed the goal line kind of a couple of times tonight. We're talking about how that worked out. We had all kinds of fun stuff to get into tonight. But first, I want to make sure that we talk some about how the game went and break down how the game went. Second, I want to talk about what this game could mean for the Houston Cougars. We'll probably still talk about how the game went in that segment as well. And then last but not least, we're going to look around our new conference, Big 12, and see how things are going. But first, let's look at some of these comments. We have a Coogs House. We have a hell yeah. We have a Yavu Donnie. And if Hollywood made a movie about Houston and Baylor football, this year it would be called Bad and Badder. Thankfully, Houston is not badder. I feel very much the same way. And of course, I've been making jokes about Ann Richards all week long. And Houston does win, as Emiliano Zapata says, the Ann Richards Bowl. Now I have to say, I was working while this game was finishing up this afternoon. I also teach and coach high school basketball. And so the reason my YouTube short came out like a little bit, probably less enthusiastic than I was at the moment, was because I was not able to film myself talking at that moment. I was working the cameras for some basketball film and stuff like that. Then very quickly got to a corner I could go talk to my phone about that game. I'm excited to talk to you about Cougars After Dark tonight and talk about this game. I watched most of it from my phone, which meant I was not live tweeting basically the last, quarter and a half and then into overtime. So let's get some fresh thoughts out there. That Donovan Smith guy, he's pretty good, huh? Donovan Smith went 20-25 tonight for 217 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm operating on the stat sheet that we think works. We were told after the game, it sounds like the Baylor people working the tech side of stats thought when Baylor scored, the game was over, akin to like a sudden death kind of thing. And so the stats were a little wonky in overtime. But again, Donnie had 20 for 25. I'm not great at math, but that's 80%. For 217 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did have 2 picks. The first one I did have a problem with. I thought he was a little bit behind when you probably need to err on the side of either it goes out of bounds or Sammy comes down with it on that first interception. His second interception, though, was a glorified heave to the end zone. It was the kind of thing where it essentially amounts to a punt right before half, and Houston got the ball coming out of half. So I don't actually hate the second interception that kind of happens in the course of the game sometime. Overall, I thought it was interesting in this game that Donovan Smith played that well against that secondary, which admittedly was a weak point for Baylor, but Houston was down essentially 2 wideouts the whole game. Joseph Manjack did not make the trip. He is still recovering. Dana Holgerson did say after the game that it sounds like he'll be back next week. Sounds like he was progressing fairly well, just not quite ready to go. Again, he still sounds like working through a concussion protocol from his, we'll call it a dirty hit from what happened in the Texas game. And then Matthew Golden left early in this one. Obviously, things might have been different had he been able to go. But Sam Brown stepped up big time, had 86 yards. A couple big catches, including a huge moment in overtime. Was a fun way to start off the overtime period on offense. Also to say kudos to Boogie Johnson, Dalton Carnes, continuing to step up this season when called upon. I like watching Boogie get the ball. I think he and Dalton both have a little bit of extra gear. They're a little shiftier than some of the guys. Like Joseph Manjack's a big, strong guy. Golden and Sam Brown go up and win jump balls. But the shiftiness I really like to see out of Carnes and Boogie. And I really like seeing those guys work in concert with one another. What else about the offense? We've talked about this on this show a couple times at this point, but the tush push It works. Like, it really, really works. We ran it 3 times in the game. One got called back because technically Baylor had 12 guys in the field. But really, the tush push worked. The tush push works really well when you have a 6'5", 245-pound quarterback. I've only been a podcaster talking about that for a long, long time. Oh, wait. That's me. The tush push worked really, really well, though. And I was glad to see it get us in the end zone in overtime. Back up a step before that, actually. Donovan Smith got called down at the 1, and I'm sitting there watching my phone, and I thought he fumbled the play before. My phone is much, I have an iPhone 12 or whatever, but it's not the biggest of phones. And so I think he's fumbled in the end zone. I got the sound off because I'm trying to be respectful of stuff going on around me at work. And I'm like, what is going on? Did he really just fumble? Are we going to lose on a fumble reaching up for the end zone after we drove 40 yards in overtime? Yes, you remember Houston had to drive 40 yards in overtime after a dumb penalty on the defense, which we'll talk about in a moment. Obviously, fumble got called not a fumble. They run the tush push from the 1-inch line or wherever that ended up amounting to. And then they go for 2. I appreciate they went for 2 because that's consistent. Daniel Holgerson did mention after the Texas game they were going to go for 2 if they scored in that one as well. They ran a play that I think I saw on Twitter was actually called horns down. They're running on the outside it's a pre-snap RPO kind of read where they're running a simple little crossing around the 2 receiver spots, and then I call it no pull power, but what they're doing is basically 2 offensive line, like the right side and the left side are blocking in 2 different directions, hoping to open up a gap. Obviously, that's going to be like an ISO play between your running quarterback and that linebacker, but when it's only 3 yards, you have a 245-pound linebacker, you feel pretty good about your chances. Houston ran that play with the cross around the outside. Donovan Smith kept it. Boom. Waves goodbye to the Baylor Bear fans in Waco. Now, the defense played very, very well as well. I think we need to give them their flowers because we are sure to criticize them when they don't. Nelson Caesar appears to be one of the best pass rushers in the Big 12, has 2.5 sacks today. He's up to 8.5 sacks in 8 games played. That's really, really good, folks. That's really, really good. Ended up with 8 tackles. Chidozie Nwankwo, I was surprised to check the stat sheet, had just 2 tackles. It felt like he was making a lot of plays. He chased down screen passes, ate up blocks, blew up pullers. I guess I didn't really realize that was not going to count for tackles, but I felt like he made a lot of plays, and he continues to make a lot of plays. And I said again, he makes like a play or 2 a week where it's like, that dude is a pro. I worry about people that don't watch the film, get worried about his measurables or whatever, but that dude looks like a pro. You also had, what else happened on the defensive side? Traylon Payne had a second half, if I'm reading all right. I forgot about, I didn't miss the half sack, I guess, or maybe I was watching my phone. I got him confused with somebody else because the pixels are small. Honestly, they played really, really solid defense until about the last 3 minutes of the game. Right? They kept Baylor at 10 points. It looked like they're going to get out of there. And then the last 3 minutes, Houston misses a field goal and Baylor gets the ball. And it felt like fate. We knew it was going to happen, that Baylor's going to drive down the field in 11 plays, 74 yards like they did, and score a touchdown to tie up the game. I'm very, very thankful, frankly, to not roll the momentum into going for 2. Goes into overtime. Baylor goes down and scores pretty quickly. And then in the dumbest of all dumb plays, I love Nelson. Nelson's a great kid. He just trying to block the PAT. But for several years, it's been a long time rule in the college football ranks now, and frankly, it's translated into the NFL as well. You can't use other linemen to propel you over the line. He did. That's a penalty. It's a 15-yarder. Houston starts the ball on the 40 to start their overtime period, and they have to score a touchdown. Now they move it down pretty quickly and did, but at the end, that was a head scratcher for sure. And as several people point out, this is still possible after this win to get to a bowl game. Mr. Hara says get to a bowl game, that they can let's win some games and get to a bowl game. And then Steve points out that if we can beat UCF and Cincy, I think we're feeling cheeky about a home game against Oklahoma State. Who knows what happens in college football. We can win this season out and go to a bowl game, and I think I'm feeling good. Still worried about the coaching. We'll worry about that in December. But for now, as people have alluded to, Houston remains potentially bowl game eligible. That's really, really, really big for a number of reasons. And before we get into those reasons, I want to talk about some other things that are really, really big, including our buddies over at Athletic Brewing. Now, Athletic Brewing is trying to change the game. They got these fantastic near beer, non-alcoholic beers, and they're doing game-changing things in that world. The game-changing moment for this game, though, has to be obviously Donovan Smith getting the push into the end zone and then scoring the 2-point conversion right after, the game-sealing drive in overtime. Pick a lot of things Donnie did. You could pick a lot of things Nelson Caesar did, but I'm going to go with the tush push working because I've been calling for the tush push for a long time. If you've been calling for something that is game changing for a long time, make sure you go check out Athletic Brewing. You can get all kinds of non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or you can buy online at athleticbrewing.com. Use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. That's near beer. Exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Speaking of all times, something you got to make sure that is working at all times is your ride. Passion, drive, and patience are what bring home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Now, I have to say, before we jump too far into this idea of getting to 6 wins and getting bowl eligible, even though Dan is ready to get there. Where's Dan's comment right here? Dan said today was a fun game. Excited from that fourth quarter on. Or so that's Alfred. And then Dan asks, Dan says, let's get 6 wins. The path is there. The path is there. I have to say what I've enjoyed about this path to there is that, frankly, it feels like things are looking, with the exception of K-State game, better. Houston looked better against West Virginia. Houston looked better even in a loss. So it kind of got screwed at the end against Texas. Houston looked better in spots today. Houston's looking better. And I think that's something that's worth pointing out about the progression of this team. Donovan Smith is now a couple months into the season. He's learning how this offense functions. He's learning his role in this offense. And frankly, we've seen more and more learning to when to use his legs and take off a little bit, right? He's learning when to find his weapons like Sam Brown. We're learning who steps up when other guys go down, like Boogie, like Carnes. On defense, we're kind of learning who our identity is. We thought for a minute there it might be more of a 3-3-5 team. Houston kind of dabbled more in a split defense today with some 4-2-5 throughout the first half and was able to really kind of bounce back and forth. That multiplicity kind of, when you're not the biggest up front, having different things kind of helps confuse folks. Interesting ways to go about it. I had to watch this team gets better each week, with the exception of the Kansas State game. We don't talk about that one a whole lot, just like we don't talk about Bruno. But I will say, in looking at this, Houston is still on track to make a bowl game. And for those who are, new to college football, new to the University of Houston, new to whatever, you have to win 6 football games to make a bowl game for sure. There are occasionally, if not enough teams across college football win 6 games, they'll occasionally invite a 5-win team. I don't mean to be a pessimist, but I wouldn't bank on that if you're Houston. It's not a national enough brand necessarily, right, to get the invite on that typically. It's typically something they assume will draw a big crowd and only has 5 wins, right? But Houston is still on track to win a bowl game. They have 4 wins after today. Houston has a fairly favorable remaining schedule. They play Cincinnati at home next week. They have Oklahoma State the week after at home as well. That's a challenging game. They beat Oklahoma today. Actually, I don't know what it was yet. And then they have Central Florida on the road to finish the season. Now, Central Florida and Cincinnati are also both new. Cincinnati has a rough go of it in the Big 12. They're currently 2-7 on the season, 0-6 in conference play, and they've played BYU and Central Florida. Central Florida is 4-5, so a little bit better on the season, but they open up with 3 straight wins against Kent State, Boise State, and Villanova. They only have 1 conference win, and it's against, you guessed it, those Cincinnati Bearcats, who are also new. Central Florida has not won against an incumbent Big 12 team. For what it's worth, Houston is the only new Big 12 program with 2 wins over incumbent teams. BYU does have 2 wins. One of them is over Cincinnati, the other over Tech. Cincinnati, as I mentioned, has none. Central Florida has just the one, and it's over Cincinnati. And then there are Houston Cougars. So I have to say, that's actually weirdly encouraging, right? You look at all the new programs entering, making the leap from Group of 5 to Power 5. Houston's doing as well or better than any of them. Now, obviously, would things be nicer had we beaten Rice? Yes, right. Would things be nicer if we'd score like some touchdowns against Kansas State or offense touchdowns against TCU? Sure. But at the end of the day, on the overarching theme of the product, things are getting better. And if they make a bowl game, I want to stress and I want to make this point very, very clear. Making a bowl game is so important for a college football team that is building something. Because if you don't make a bowl game, your season just ends after November. Your last game is for Houston, November 25th. They're all around Thanksgiving. And if you are not bowl eligible, your season just ends right there. You go to off-season weights, go to whatever. You don't have any formal practices until spring football practice. If you make a bowl game, you have between 2 weeks and a month more practice. You have between 2 weeks and a month more of formal, full-on football practice for your young guys, your youth that are developing on the roster. That means they get a full month to continue to prepare. You get to continue to work, practice drills against live reps. Frankly, you can get some like live, good on good time in the middle of those couple weeks of practice because you don't have a game for a couple of weeks. You get to really get into what feels like a fall camp type of atmosphere, preparing for one game, whenever that game is, depending on what your bowl game is. And that's really, really important for developing your youth, for working with new coaching staff, new offensive line coach like Houston has. You get to kind of reaffirm some of your core values and those kinds of things. For new players that aren't necessarily young but are new to the system, like Donovan Smith, get to continue to work live practices for another month under the offensive program you got going on. Frankly, if you're trying to, allure recruits, we had a talk earlier this week about whether or not they're trying to get 2024s, but we know Dana's after some key 2025s in the greater Houston area. Those guys can come watch, have their recruit weekends and see those kinds of things because you're still going. All those kinds of moments happen when you make a bowl game. And if you don't, your program kind of has to go dormant until spring practice. It's a whole different ball game. And if Houston wants to continue to develop and grow, getting into the next stratosphere of college football programs. And I think we want to see that happen pretty quickly. We'll see how quickly it does happen. If they want to get into that, though, they have to develop this offensive line, develop this defensive line, develop in the trenches, get Big 12 ready across the board. It's going to require some depth. That depth requires those young guys to be practicing. Those practices happen if they make a bowl game. Houston's as set up as any, and the new four in the Big 12 to get that done. Again, they have a favorable schedule. They have to win 2 out of 3 against Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and Central Florida to get into the bowl things. Now, Steve points out there are a bunch of Big 12 bowl tie-ins as far as like fun bowl games to be a part of. Steve, I don't mean to call you wrong. I'm not going to jinx that. I'm going to let that happen. Oh, Tug chewed up my dog. That's a jingle in the background. I'm going to let that happen when it happens. I don't want to get too far down the road on that one. I will say, like, these are not like gimme games by any stretch. Cincinnati, there's still some bad blood, honestly, from the 2021 American Athletic Conference game, championship game. Obviously, they've changed coaches, changed a lot of things there. No more Sauce Gardner on the roster, but they're still, I'm sure, going to have some feelings about that one. They still, Houston and Cincinnati both. That was a not a game that went Houston's way by any stretch, but teams did not seem to like each other once upon a time. Oklahoma State is flat good, and I made fun of them throughout the first 2 months of the year because they did things like lose 2 major Applewhite Southern Alabama, and now they're number 22 in the country and likely rising because they beat Oklahoma over the weekend. Central Florida, I have made plenty of fun of by calling them, frankly, Central Florida. They don't even like that name. But when I look at Central Florida, I also get a team that, like, they knew Dylan Gabriel as well as anyone, but they also kept Oklahoma close. They had 3 non-conference wins to start the year. Houston did not. And frankly, they're a team that does a really good job recruiting the state of Florida. And Houston is working to recruit the state of Texas, state of Houston. I guess call it state of Houston. They're looking to recruit better as well. So they're a challenging set of teams. I don't mean to like bypass them completely, but it's not like they've got Texas, Oklahoma, and I don't know, insert West Virginia, whoever next, right? Like, they've got games they can win on the schedule. I think that's really, really important. I also think, as far as things that are really, really important go, like winning is really, really important. And they won today. And if you want to keep on winning. You go to PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks is the number one daily fantasy site out there. And right now, they've got this cool combo policy where you can get in there and you can get things like over or under 10.5 LeBron James threes and Travis Kelce receptions. And so, like, if LeBron has 5 threes and Kelce has 7 receptions, you're over that 10.5 because they combine the two. If you think it's under that because LeBron doesn't shoot threes, he's old, or what, you can get under. I do all kinds of cool stuff with combinations of stats. They make all kinds of options and players and all kinds of unique picks to pick from at PrizePicks. Make sure to check them out. They've also got this cool reboot policy going right now where your entries stay in play even if one of your guys gets injured. For NFL and college football games, if you have a player exits the game in the first half and does not return the second, that player gets rebooted, is what they're calling it. And PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with that kind of injury insurance. So make sure you go check them out. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. You put in $100, they give you back $100. Make sure you go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, go win this weekend. Now, as far as winning and losing goes, I do want to take a look across our new Big 12 conference. Obviously, Houston winning in overtime is one of the more exciting matchups of the weekend. Kansas beating Iowa State, I think, is one of the more continue the trend there for Kansas. They beat Oklahoma last weekend, beat Iowa State this weekend. Kansas is an outside shot to still play in the Big 12 championship game. Central Florida did beat Cincinnati. I think that'll be an interesting matchup because Houston plays both of those. I obviously, when I'm going back to watch film, against Cincinnati, I'll probably watch that one to kind of cheat and get to watch both teams at once. Should probably point out on Thursday, it was in Lubbock, I believe, that Texas Tech beat TCU in a pair of games that Houston opened up the Big 12 with. Interesting to follow those teams this season. Tech has been gotten to 4-5. TCU has fallen to 4-5. The big two games of the weekend, though, for people watching, were Kansas State, Texas, and Oklahoma State, because both Texas and Oklahoma were playing challenging teams that are going to stay in the Big 12. And all of us folks that are staying in the Big 12 don't want to see a Texas versus Oklahoma final in the Big 12 championship game. We want to have some faith in what's coming, what is sticking around the Big 12. Both games came out very, very close. Texas held on to win 33-30. Looked like Kansas State was going to take it away. Kansas State got down inside the 10-yard line. In overtime, got down inside the 10-yard line, needed a field goal to tie, elected on 4th down to go for it, and did not get the pass off. Pass rush got after before he could let the ball go. For what it's worth, Kansas State was down big in that game and had a big, I want to talk about like it's basketball. It was like a 23-0 run to come back and only tie that game up. People are being critical, like they should have kicked. But after watching, actually I have someone in the comments just said they should have kicked. But after watching Houston win on a walk-off in overtime like they did, I actually kind of, on the road, I kind of get it, right? Like, just get out there, get out. You're already going second. You don't know what's going to happen the next overtime. Get in, get out, right? The crowd's not on your side, those kinds of things. And frankly, I kind of like the cojones it takes there. I do. I like the cojones it takes there. But doesn't work Kansas State. Did work for Houston and Waco. Texas wins and remains a one-loss Big 12 team. Oklahoma, on the other hand, in the what is last matchup of Bedlam that we'll see for who knows how long, went into Stillwater and lost. Oklahoma State won 27-24. Gundy has really turned his year around. We were talking about, is he on the hot seat in like late September, early October, and now we're in November talking about like, is this the best team in the Big 12? They are still just a one loss in conference. They do have 2 losses. Again, they lost to Southern Alabama and Major Applewhite earlier this season. But Oklahoma State and Kansas kind of remain those mainstay Big 12 teams. The teams will be in the Big 12 next year. Kind of the hope for us to potentially knock off Texas, Oklahoma, in that Big 12 championship. I've not done the math on what it would take for Oklahoma to get there, but now they have 2 Big 12 losses. It feels like a very, very outside shot that Oklahoma were to get there. I don't even know Texas's schedule, but it felt like Kansas State was a potential good knockoff opponent. Looks like Texas finishes with TCU, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. I guess magic could happen, but they'll probably be pretty heavily favored in each of those. So maybe it's a Big 12 championship matchup with Oklahoma State or Kansas. They already played Kansas, I guess, but it's hard to beat a team twice. I don't know. We want someone besides Texas to win the Big 12, and we want it to happen now. I will say, looking at this conference, what continues to amaze me as someone new to it with Houston is it feels like every week something stupid happens. Something just silly. What is going on in this conference happens. And someone from the outside might think that thing today was Houston beating Baylor. I think the thing today that happened is Oklahoma facing a must-win game against Oklahoma State team that, again, was not very good for the first part of the season in a rivalry game. And, you heard Gundy talking crap as far back as media days about this. You knew they'd be charged up. You knew Stillwater would be a tough place to play. And they went in and get beat in the fourth quarter of that one. I think that's a little weird and wonky. I would also point to, West Virginia running through BYU like they stole something. It's a little weird and wonky. Texas Tech beating TCU is a little weird and wonky. People from the outside are probably calling us the weird and wonkiness of this week. As Godlike, I believe is what that name is. It says Houston is the first of the new four to win a Big 12 game on the road as well. I hadn't even put that together, but shouts Godlike on that one. Obviously, with 2 wins, they have the most chances, I guess, right? But important to point out. I'm excited about this, and I talk myself by every Friday into that we're going to win the football game, and I've only been right a handful of times at this point. But I will say that I'm not even going to have to take that long to talk myself into beating Cincinnati next week. We'll be back in your audio feeds, your YouTube platforms, etc. on Monday morning. We'll do a little bit more of a breakdown. We'll break down some of the analytics of this game, see what kind of trends Houston can bring with them moving forward. We also have a basketball game Monday night to break down. A fun basketball season ahead. Houston is one of the best teams in the country year in, year out the last couple of years, it feels like, and they're entering the best conference in college basketball. So obviously, we got to talk about the tip-off of basketball season Monday night with Louisiana Monroe. I don't know what the even betting line is for that one, but I imagine it's Coogs by a lot. But we'll talk about that in the season at large, some on Monday as well. Lots of fun things happening in the third ward with our Houston Cougars. Whose house is exactly right, Cal? It is Coogs House each and every day here at Locked on Cougs, your daily Houston Cougar podcast. Make sure you subscribe, like, review, whatever you're on the audio platforms, on video platforms. Hit subscribe, like, and comment on the videos. Hit the bell so you know that we're live, like we are tonight, for Cougars After Dark. Thank you all so much for listening to Locked on Cougs today. And if you're tuning on the audio platforms after the fact, make sure you check out the live YouTube show, Cougars After Dark, on Saturday nights after the football day is over. Thank you all so much. Locked on Cougs is part of the Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.